My buddy was a glass blower, and I'd hang out in his garage every day while I was going to CSU. And then, for whatever reason, right when I graduated from CSU, a bond company approached me and offered me a job.
What up, y'all? I'm Steve, and welcome to another exciting Elev8, where we sit down with some cool-ass artists in this industry. First, we have this really cool ambassador program. You can join as an Elev8 doll or an Elev8 gent, and it's really awesome. You get to help us build Elev8. It's super unique, super special, and you're really a part of something special. Check out Elev8ambassador.com to learn more. Another cool thing we have is our Elev8 Veterans program. I'm really honored to be a part of it. Teresa helps run it, and it's super awesome. We get to rehabilitate and reacclimate veterans into society our way. And you know what? I think we're doing it right. Go check it out at Elev8veterans.com. Third, there's Elev8 Bingo. It's super cool, super fun, and we get to show you more of what we do. And on top of that, every game there's a chance to win $50 credits for Elevate8glassgallery.com. Go check it out. And now let's roll into this super awesome Elev8. All right, welcome to Elev8. We got Mad Machete Matt here, and thank you so much for joining me, man. This is a really cool time here. I've got to meet you a few times in person at the events, and it's just always great talking to you. And I got to see your blades in person as well, and it's freaking crazy. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. It was good chatting with you last time at Las Vegas.
Yeah, it was. So my first question, we're just gonna go right into it, is how did you get into this glass game, man? Like I say it all the time to the artists, like I think y'all are crazy. I know, because it's hard fucking work, man. So how did you get into this thing? And I know you love it.
Well, my buddy was a glass blower, and I'd hang out in his garage every day while I was going to CSU. And then, for whatever reason, right when I graduated from CSU, a bond company approached me and offered me a job. And at that point, I'd already saved up enough money to buy a torch, but I didn't have a place to blow glass. And then I started my career with Spaceglass.
Nice. And they've been around, Spaceglass. I think they've been around almost 20 years, 15 to 20 years, right?
I believe since 95.
95, yeah. So that's a long time. I'm not
Yeah.
doing math.
Yeah,
Yeah,
old school.
old school. So that had to have been really neat to have that
Oh yeah,
opportunity and go in there. Did you learn a lot?
I learned quite a bit, especially the business side of glass, and just the craziest thing. So like the first day on the job, they teach me how to work a lathe, and as you know, as a glass blower, step up to a lathe before the bench. That didn't happen with me. And then by like the second time, they left me alone with the lathe. So it's always been like an insane experience.
No doubt. Yeah, it's totally different, and that you mentioned that, it's crazy because I think they've learned over time. And the reality is it's easier to teach somebody on a lathe than almost by hand. It's fucking hard to start getting it. And although I haven't done it that way, we've been doing that with like parts we make for the surfer, where we used to make them
Yeah.
by hand. It'd take me a year and a half to teach a blower to make a simple part. And now we can get them in 3-4 weeks, 5 weeks sometimes.
Oh, totally. Well, like the lathe itself is a completely different animal. I have a bunch of buddies who start off on the bench and then they pick up a lathe and then they're like, what am I supposed to do? Because physics of blowing glass with my hand is you could tilt it back and forth.
Mhm.
And on the lathe, it's like it stays level.
So you almost learn, you almost are forced to learn glass. I gotta imagine in a different way, because you don't get to use gravity in a different sense. You'll only have
Oh,
gravity
totally.
pulling with centrifugal force, and that's it. And then you gotta
Yeah,
learn
you
how
have
to
to,
blow into it and keep that
yeah.
out.
Yeah, it's all thermodynamics at the end of the day. And with working on the lathe, you have to understand when it's in a solid versus stable state versus a molten state. Because as soon as it gets out of that center of rotation, it goes all wonky and you can't do anything about it.
Right. It's crazy.
Very unforgiving.
Very unforgiving. And so how long and when did you actually start blowing glass? How long ago was that?
I started in March of 2016. Like literally a week after I was CSU, I had a job at the bong shop.
Man, that's pretty cool. So with that, like, have you used your college education into what you're doing now? Do you maybe wish trades would have come upon you sooner before college, and you could have rolled into glass blowing sooner, or are you happy with how it happened? I just
Oh yeah, I get asked this a lot. I'm actually pretty happy with the way it worked out. There's always a part of me that wishes that, because I was in college for 5 years, wishing that I had an extra 5 years of experience. But I actually have a degree. So as you know, as a small business owner, understanding economic models and like, I specifically I focused on production. So like understanding like how is value added to a product, like why is this more valuable than this,
that's what
the
you were
value
doing
of
in
time.
school,
Yeah,
right?
and I use a lot of it on the back end of just running just a glass business as a whole. From the very beginning, I was running my own studio, so I had to be on top of like gas and electricity and understanding how that factors into the end cost of the product, so to speak, as well as just general demand and supply variables. Like I'm only one guy, and inevitably speaking, I can only do so much work in a given day. So how can I maximize my efforts so I'm A, increasing my ability, my technique, and B, still able to pay the bills.
Right, right. And that's what life's about, trying to balance all that stuff out there. And looks like you got it.
So far, so good. I can't complain.
Right. Hell yeah, man. Did you have any mentors while you were while you're being an artist? That was I don't know how the fuck I put that. Did you have any mentors?
I'd say Dan and Liz of Spaceglass were like huge influences for me. I worked for them for a couple years, and then I bought a lathe off them, and I was working out of their studio. So like they were like my main foundation as far as like what is glass blowing is, and like the people I went to questions first. And actually, I just had a call with Liz this morning. We just shooting to let her know that I had an interview with y'all.
Right, right. So that's great because the relationship is still going to this day and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was definitely rocky. So basically I stopped working for them when there was like that slight little bump recession. They wanted to keep me on, but they still wanted me in the studio. So I bought a lathe off them. Well, I only know how to make space glass stuff. So like when I went like fully independent on my bong line, I was kind of like butting heads with her a little bit. But at the end of the day, I moved into my new line of work, and like we're awesome.
Right, right. And
But
that's
there's so many bugs that need to be made.
right, right. And that's the thing. Like you only know what you know. You are a product of your environment. I mean, mostly. And
Oh yeah.
then so it takes that. And they could have just been like, fuck you and cut it. But instead there was that argument, there was a discussion, a debate, whatever you have it, and y'all came to a beautiful conclusion that made
Oh
some
yeah.
adjustments, and it's beautiful. I love that, man.
Well, if you're familiar with Liz, you understand that like they're really level headed. I think at one point we even sat down and we lined the sand like, hey, we're cool with you making this if you do it this way. And that way we can both sell to the same shops. Cause like since I was making the same thing, I was running into a wall because like, you know, space glass, they're everywhere.
And they're very unique, very
Oh yeah.
unique. It's their thing. So yeah, that's awesome, man. Did you have any classes that you've taken throughout your career, and do you feel they were a good thing if you did?
I've only taken 2 classes in my entire career, which is actually something I need to get on top of. My main foundation was like a working apprenticeship where I learned the basics, and everything else has been trial and error. So about 2 years ago, I took a Pogo's class at the glass grind when he
Yeah,
made that large Tommy gun.
yeah.
That was my main foundation for my current work with making like full scale weapons. And then I recently took a class with Lewis Wilson, and I had to take that class.
Right, right. Man, that's awesome. Have you given any instruction to people or any classes?
Um, Here and there, like I'll have a buddy come over who is struggling with a certain technique on the bench, and I'll show him how to do something. Or like when I moved a more higher end line, I actually had my buddy come over and I gave him all my old designs.
Right.
Um, so I've actually been thinking a little bit about doing some like some classes, but as of the moment, I don't have much going on as far as that's concerned.
And it sounds like you're pretty full right now. So there's only so much time in a day, and man,
Oh, totally.
making glass is pretty cool. I know that. Where do you get your inspiration and creativity from?
Uh, if I'm being 100% honest with you, it's Dungeons and Dragons.
Nothing wrong with that. I grew up on it, brother.
Oh hell yeah! I know D&D is becoming a lot more mainstream, but like there are some people who still have that stigma of like, "Ooh, you do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I hang out with my buddies, we smoke weed, we roll dice." But a lot of like the inspiration for like my weapon line is based off of like D&D with my buddies. Like, oh, my character has a warhammer. This one has a battle axe or a short sword.
Right, right. That's really awesome. I love D&D. We make this little box here, and same thing. It came from a D&D thing. It was for dice and shit. And I was
Oh,
like,
cool.
yeah. And I was like, all right, well, how can we turn this into smoking? Like, D&D is
Oh,
awesome. So
oh yeah.
if anybody says differently, it's because I think they don't know. They haven't played it. They
They
don't
don't.
get it. Maybe they don't have an imagine. That's what D&D is about, is a freaking imagination, man.
Oh yeah, and just having a good time with your friends. And like, a lot of times, as you said, like they haven't had any experience with it, and they're just assuming.
Mm-hmm. Right, because of whatever. Yeah, man, that's really cool. So do you, that's a question I asked. Do you have other hobbies outside of glass? It sounds like you do play D&D. Do you do anything else, or are you fully consumed?
I'm fully consumed with glass. I have a hobby of collecting retro video games. So I have like a collection of like a bunch of NES cartridges, a bunch of Super Nintendo cartridges. If you actually you can't see, but I'm wearing
All
a
right.
but I'm a big fan of like old D&D old games. And then what I'm actually excited about is tomorrow the game Elden Ring is being released.
All
So
right.
I'm actually working all day today, so I could take all day tomorrow and the weekend and just have some fun.
But you planned it out, right? Hell yeah. And we got you
Work hard to play
today
hard.
even too, right? Um, what is your preferred style or technique that you absolutely love?
If I'm being honest, like I'm kind of all over the place. One of my main issues I had when I first started blowing glass, and you can ask Liz from Spaceglass, is that I never would really sit down and master one technique. So like I've done a lot of different stuff from like line work to dichro to crushed opal, informally here and there, so I understand the technique. And the weapon line specifically has been like the turning point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to just sit down. This is all I'm going to do. I'm going to master this technique. So I have like a pretty wide basket of technical skills under my belt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm working more on like large scale construction items. So like my machetes, the knives, the battle axes, and so forth. At least that's what I'm focusing on right now.
Right. And that's a question I like to ask too, man. And it was a great transition. Is, have you had any periods in your career where you made a shift? And it sounds like you did, and it was the pogo class almost that.
Yeah, I took a class with Pogo, and then someone I always have to give for a big thanks to is Jimmy Seaglass. He makes bread pendants. He had the booth right behind me at Las Vegas, but it was like maybe like 3 or 4 months after the class. Like he's my homie I play D&D with, but we're just talking about glass, and he's like, "Hey, what if we sat down and did like design a piece?" I'm like, "Okay, cool." And we sat down and like one thing or another, I'm like, "Hey, I want to make a glass machete." And for whatever reason, he wasn't interested in the build, but we started talking about how to do it from like a fundamental level, and that was like the big turning point.
Right, right, man. That's really cool. Yeah. Do you? Well, now you're making the weapons and whatnot. Do you have any particular thing that you really truly like to make, or same thing? You're all over there just trying to experiment and just really experience the crazy rabbit hole of glass.
There's always a part of me that's always trying to like deviate, be like, "Oh, I know you're supposed to do this today, but what if we did this instead?" And fortunately enough, with my schedule for like the next 6 months, I have time to experiment with, but like I have been trying to focus on just the machetes. Currently I'm working on some like new weapon designs. I actually ordered this history book. It has like 1,500 illustrations and photos of actual weapons throughout the ages with scale. So hopefully in the near future, you're going to be seeing a lot more designs out of my shop.
So you mentioned the scale. Is that important to you that you try to make your weapons to scale?
Yeah, partially because I like the challenge. I started hanging out with more heady people in the last couple of years, and like I never knew the size of the pieces, like a heady piece being like this big, because I see it on Instagram. And with my background as a bond maker, I like making big stuff. So
Right,
I like the idea of bringing that heady, small, intricate detail, but on a much larger scale.
right, right. Yeah, heady is a weird thing, right? Like it's just size can mean heady, or all the different things, and it's small means heady. It's just there's a lot to it. I think something heady is when the artist challenged himself.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But you'd also agree within the last, like, say, 2 or 3 years, the style has been to get things much more and more compact, which is
Yeah,
a talent in and of itself. I don't do micro. Like if I start working on something small, that's when I have issues. I like big, I like stupid.
yeah, and I do too, where it feels like you're holding this big chunk, and we know if you drop glass, it's gonna break. But I like to think in my head, man, I could bang it and it would survive, which it probably wouldn't, but because it's glass. But yeah, it's really cool. Like big stuff is a challenge. The heat, there's more errors to go
Oh yeah.
into it as well, and yeah, that's nuts. What is your favorite color to work with?
My favorite color, and I'm having a very hard time finding it, is Alien Tech, but not the Alien Tech that you currently can buy. The old formula from like 6 or 7 years ago.
The stuff that cracks?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. You just have to know how to run your kiln. So like
Right.
one of the big issues with that is the color molecules recrystallizing in the kiln. So you don't want to get it out above a certain temperature. I run my kiln at 990 when I'm working that. And yes, there's a chance of cracking. It is a very catastrophic color, but like I haven't been able to find a color with that same hue.
No, it's special, man.
It's amazing.
It is. It's amazing. And yeah, and that's the thing about colors, it's always slightly different, whether even if they have the measurement right, was the actual amount of time cooking right,
Mhm.
or the raw material,
Oh
was
yeah,
it contaminated? Was it from a different supplier? Was the raw material made at a different time?
yeah.
All of those things affect the end result of a color and how it's done. And
Oh, completely.
it's so
And like
neat.
there's so much chemistry involved in glass blowing before I knew it. Like I'm actually looking at periodic tables, be like, oh, it has this, and this in there. That means I can encase it. Um, which glass is fucking crazy.
Oh, so you started figuring out just by looking at the periodic table, if it has a certain element in it and you encase it, it's going to crack. So you're using
Certain
that.
stuff does. Like I have a very rudimentary chemistry, and a lot of what I've heard is through the grapevine. But there are certain families of colors that don't like reacting in certain ways. I actually have a notebook where I took all the notes down. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'm not that smart.
Mhm. Well, I don't know who said it once, but I think it was somebody philosophy out of Japan or China. But the weakest or the lightest ink is better than the strongest memory. So it's
That's a good quote.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and then so if that's your favorite color, what color would you stay away from?
I looked over the color chart before we did this thing, and I was trying to figure that out. I like most of the colors.
It's all how you kind of use it and figure
Yeah,
that challenge out.
I'd say the one that's been puzzling me the most would have to be Lucy, Atomic Kumquat, and Electric Flamingo, because they're all very similar UV colors. But at
Mhm.
the same time, I can notice subtle differences between the three. So like whenever I come to using that in a piece, I always like spend way too much time trying to pick the right one. When in reality, the end user probably won't know the difference.
Right. So just narrow it down. It goes, yeah. Or just pick one that you like the best and stick with it. Um, what do you consider to be the most challenging piece you've ever created in your career so far?
I would probably have to say the piece I made for this last Las Vegas for the glass competition. I did like a full color battle axe, except for the blade, which was clear. It was my first attempt at doing a full color that large. I probably put about like 4 or 5 pounds of line work into it just to make the body. It took me
Wow.
about like again, I was working really slow because I'm like, I don't want to fuck this up, but like it took me around 2 weeks to build. And
Working,
even
working
then,
all week.
it didn't come out the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, and it's really hard for glass ever to come almost out exactly how you want it to. Like you have to do that dance with it, obviously. Um, but it came out good, right?
I really like the way it came out, and I think I might keep it for a personal piece.
Right.
I usually keep my milestone pieces that are like, oh, this is the first time I've made. I have my first machete I ever made, the first axe. This will be the first full color axe. I'm like, I got to keep it.
Yeah, yeah. Good, good. I like hearing that, man, because those things, same thing, you can have a memory of it, but when it's there, all those memories come back instantly, and it's just
Oh
neat
yeah.
having that. So
Well, like as my background as a production bong maker, it's always good to keep the first one on your shelf because you're gonna like you say you make the piece and then 3 months later you get an order for the piece and you don't remember how to make it. Well, you just measure it on the shelf.
right, right. That's a great idea, man. That's a great idea. Because in your head, I know when I've made stuff too, if I don't have a sample there, it starts to just get bigger and bigger. Everything gets bigger, and you're like, wait a minute, it got twice as big over the last four? Like, no way.
Well, like I'll even keep notes because like my biggest pet peeve is like I haven't made something for a while and I'm making it and there's this issue, like this minor issue. And then by the end, I figure out how to fix it. And like, oh, if I do this, like change up the order. And then literally like as I'm smoking a blunt before I go to bed, I'm like, you already solved that problem last time. You just forgot how to fix it. So like I hate when like issues stack up like because you just haven't done it in so long, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's that repetitive thing. It's a hard thing. The glass will want to pull you all over, but to
Oh
put
yeah.
it some in this back thing, you gotta keep doing it. And just like anything, you don't use it, you lose it a little bit. You can gain it
Oh yeah.
like riding a bike, but
Well, my
um
buddy was asking me like, "Are you a glass master yet?" Because like I've done over 10,000 hours of glass blowing, and like as I've told many other people, I'm like, no, I'm not a glass master because there's so many individual facets to glass.
what would
Like
you consider to be to become a glass master?
I would say I'd probably go with that 10,000 hour mark, but I'd say 10,000 hours on one thing. So like
To master a particular thing in glass.
very particular thing because like you can have a general glass blowing ability, but like you're not a master at that one technique. Like I'd say Cameron Burns is a master at line work. There's
Right.
no doubt about it. Like he's a master at line work. Like and all the other like Punty, he's a master at those disc flips.
Mhm. Right. And who knows? I don't know if they are a master at something else or not. Sometimes we don't see what they're doing.
Oh yeah,
And all those things, once you master something in glass, it becomes slightly easier to master other techniques. But
oh yes, definitely.
yeah, yeah. But right, man, it is. It's and then just in that's only if you're talking maybe boro, and then there's another whole side of like soft glass, or then this other thing called cold working, like
Yeah.
electroforming, like and that's another thing. Yours, I it there's nothing really out there like it, right? Like so most of the stuff is round because we get tubes and we blow into it. Yours is all really flat, really thick.
Yeah.
How are you doing that?
Um, so it was definitely a weird transition moving over to that because like beginning of my career, I was working out of my shed, doing bench work and then doing bongs. And then eventually after I bought the lathe, I was doing strictly bongs. And then when I got this idea to make this machete, it was definitely like a weird flip. I definitely brought up a lot of challenges I didn't expect, like putting in the down stem into a can. Well, if that down stem isn't perfectly bent, if there's any wiggle, the the ground joint is going to be straight. So like it was definitely like a big learning curve. But with my background as a bong maker, I understood heat base and I understood how to set up seals in certain ways. So I was able to at least carry that over into the new tech.
Right, right, nice. Have you competed any events before or anything? Because well,
The
you just
only
said Glass Vegas, but
I haven't done any actually. My memory is betraying me. So I did one or two in-person glass blowing events at a local head shop, and I actually won a one-handed pipe competition.
oh, nice, man, nice, nice. And
Yeah,
where was that at?
it was at the Joint Smoke Shop up in Fort Collins.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
And so
you
that
had to make a one-handed pipe. I just blowing glass with one hand, and I don't know what I was going through my head, but I decided to coil pot a spoon using my teeth.
so you were the only one with a coil potted spoon, I have to imagine.
Everyone else had clear, but I had this like it was a small like peanut spoon, but I was the only one to use color, and it was an actual spoon.
Right. And that's why it goes back to the beginning. Like I think glass blowers are a little bit crazy, like what makes you decide to go ahead and coil pot a piece of glass with your mouth? I love it, man.
It's because I'm gullible. I was talking to this one dude, and he is a straight up sarcastic asshole. Like his goal in life is to fuck with you, but he's also a glass blower. So we were talking about the like, oh, I'm gonna enter in the one-handed spoon competition. At the time, I was doing a lot of frit work, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a one-handed frit spoon. That seems pretty challenging. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna do I'm gonna coil pot with my mouth. And in my head, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's totally possible. I didn't think of that. Well, he was pulling my leg. And that night I went home and I figured out the technique. So when I entered the competition and I showed him the spoon, like he looked at me like and just walked away.
I love it, man. Um, and so do you, I assume you do consume cannabis yourself then?
I do. Actually, where did my joint go? Okay, I found my joint. I had one right behind my ear earlier.
So do you prefer the flower, the concentrates or dabs, or do you like edibles or just the whole thing of the plant?
I mainly smoke joints. I am a lightweight. I like to joke that good weed is too spicy for me sometimes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't smoke, some people smoke a ton,
Oh,
some are right
totally.
in the middle. It's all about you, you know, and
Oh, totally.
that's what it's
And
about.
one of the beautiful things about only smoking mids is like I can always offer weed at a function and no one takes me up on it.
I love it, man. I love it. Um, and then do you use your own pieces when you consume, or do you have other people's? I know you keep some of your milestones. So do you use those, or do you collect glass as well?
I I've actually been meaning to get into collecting. For the longest time, I was focused on saving money for my business, but like now that like I'm at a much more comfortable space, I'd like to start collecting more. One of my main issues is storage because I have like shelves upon shelves of a bunch of pieces that I've made. And it's always been hard to get something from someone else when I know I have at least like 17 bongs at home.
Right. No, I know exactly how that is, man. Yep. Um, what can we look forward to in the future from you?
I'm actually designing a line of like dry pipes that are like miniature versions of my weapons.
Oh, nice.
Because someone says I can't. One of my buddies was joking with me saying I couldn't go miniature, and I kind of want to show him up. So
Yeah, like you couldn't do a coil potted spoon with your mouth.
most of the big milestones in my life is someone fucking with me and me not realizing it, and then me trying to show them up.
So do you find that you're a very competitive person?
A little bit.
Maybe
I'm
with
very
yourself?
Oh, 100% with myself. I made a Warhammer yesterday, and it took me 7 attempts. And I because I was fucking up the head of the Warhammer. And I go out to my studio this morning. I'm looking at them. I'm like, none of them were bad. They all could have been used, but I got into this weird mental space which made me want to break everything.
Right, right. And that's just that dance with glass where you know exactly what you want and you're trying to manipulate all the forces, heat, gravity, everything,
Oh yeah.
and just get it right. And you're just like, motherfucker, I want you perfect. Because I know I can do it, right? And
Oh yeah, totally. The worst is when like you're working on like a set of 20 and then the last one fucks with you.
right,
Because
because it
you
should have
know
been.
that day you could have done it.
Yeah, and that's I've talked to, and I'm sure you have too, but you always wonder like, does that glass artist produce glass where it never breaks anymore? And I've yet to I've met him to where it rarely ever happens, but it does happen when they're gradually always stepping outside of their skill sets. And
Yeah.
do you find that happens to you a lot where starting new things you might have a struggle through it and then you
Oh
find it?
yeah. Yeah, it's since I'm doing new things as of late, I started this new protocol in the shop. The first thing I do is I make something I know how to make, which starts the tone for the rest of the day,
Like a
and
warm up.
then I make myself depressed by breaking everything in sight.
Yeah, it's even better than a warm up. It's kind of like it's just a pep rally almost for yourself, getting it going.
It's
Um,
mainly for my ego, because like the other day I was fucking with this idea and like it like when you know how it goes, like when it doesn't work out the way you thought so in your head, you start questioning your ability, but that's not the case. You just forget that like every time you come with a new product, you have to go through that whole song and dance.
right. It's nuts how just one new product. Yeah, it's just a pipe or it's just a bong or something, but just that Maria or just the yank or just these things to do it every time or to get it how you want it. Sometimes it's a lot more difficult. And
I always say the worst thing that can happen when you start a new design is you get it perfect the first time, because the second time you won't, and then you start questioning yourself, like what did I do wrong?
that with glass, does that happen to you often? I've seen it often, but you'll go into something and you will get it that first time, and then your second, third, fourth is like, what the fuck, and then there's a gradual to get back. Does that happen to you?
A lot. And the way I like to like look at it is like if you look at it, a statistical graph as far as your attentiveness versus your confidence. So when you're first making a piece, you don't know where the difficulties are. And like I tend to hyper focus. So every step becomes 4 steps, you know what I'm saying? And then the next time I make the piece, I have the general gist of the assembly, except I miss key steps that I didn't think were key steps.
That makes total sense, man, because you are on that first piece, you're so focused, you're
Mhm.
so into it.
You're a
The
little on
next one,
edge.
you're like, I got it.
Yeah, I got it. And then crack.
Right. Yeah, and that, I think that goes, like life is very complicated. It's you got to have a plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you got to understand how to plan,
Oh yeah.
and do all
Yeah.
that.
Personally, whenever I approach a piece, I always like at least have a diagram in my head and steps of how I go about something. And that's a lot more important when you're working on a big item because that one step can change everything with the assembly.
Right. So
But I've
that
also met glass blowers who are the complete opposite, where they're like, I'm just going to shoot from the hip and it's going to come out the way it comes out. And I know how to make it the way I need to make it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. And so maybe that's like the first idea, is where everyone is super hyper focused and it comes out somehow. But
Yeah.
there is something where you run it through, because I do believe a lot of professional sports people and stuff like that, they'll run, like if they're going down a mountain or something through a ski slope, they'll run that whole run through their head and do it
Oh,
and
yeah.
do it and do it. And I don't know, practice makes perfect, even if it's in your head.
Oh, totally. But like, honestly, at the same time, failure is also like a main ingredient in that development because you have to know how far you can push something. Um,
Right.
when I first started blowing glass, I don't drink much. Like I'm a pretty sober person when it comes to alcohol. So like I might drink like every once a month. I spend years since I've touched a drink. But what I do is I get shitty drunk. I turn on my torch, not my kiln, by the way, not the kiln, and I try to assemble a rig. And I then tried to let it bench cool and just see like it's rig with the expectation that it's going to explode,
Oh, right.
just so I could see where the stress is at, or oh, it's going to break here. And then every now and then I get one that doesn't break, and I'm like, what? Okay, that's cool.
Right. What did you do different in that time, or what? How did you find it? Or maybe you discovered flame annealing or something new, or
Oh yeah, or like the first ones I kept tagging the downstem, and this time for whatever reason I just took that extra 30 seconds in between that spot welding on the seal to let it cool down so it wouldn't move around.
that's another thing in glass, right? Like you want to go fast, you want to get it there because it takes sometimes a long time to do something. And then when something happens, it happens like instantly,
Immediately.
but you also need to slow the fuck down and
Oh
smell
yeah.
the roses. Because if you don't, it moves around. And like you said, you just got to wait for a second,
Yeah.
take a hit of some pot while it hits down, or drink some coffee, or I don't know, man.
Well,
But
like a
yeah,
great craftsman tip I learned from I forget who it was. Fast is slow and slow is fast. If you go
right,
fast, you make mistakes, and then when you have to go back to clean the mistakes, it takes longer amount of time. But if you go slow and you go methodical, you get it done faster.
right. That goes to something almost I heard, less is more, when way back when it was grown. If you give something too much, sometimes go too fast. Once you break it and fuck it, you like bending glass. If you heat it up and you bend it too quick, it kinks. But
Oh
if you
yeah.
heat it up nice and go slow, al dente,
Oh
slow.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've been doing a lot more bends as of late, and that was my biggest issue in the beginning. Is like I put too much heat in the middle. I mean, in reality, if I want to bend this small, I got to heat up this much material just so that it gets an even movement,
Right. It's
so
like
that you avoid those
feathering
kinks.
it, and
Hmm.
uh and not getting one heat too much, because the heat will be in there, and it needs to almost like repenetrate, or in a sense,
Yeah.
like if it's too hot here, it needs to heat this up and this needs to cool this down, so it evens out and the bend gets, otherwise it's a kink
Well,
which
then you're working with like basic thermodynamics of understanding like heat density and how it perpetrates through an object.
right. And that's a big thing. You know, maybe that would be a good thing if there was something out there, basic thermodynamics of glass. It would be a good thing for a glass blower. Anybody starting out probably to know some basic
Oh yeah.
thermodynamics, how it
I
works.
I spent too much money. I bought this scientific glass blowing textbook, like right. Oh, I'm gonna learn a lot of bunch of cool stuff. And a lot of it wasn't glass blowing. A lot of it was like, oh, these are the different apparatuses you can do. But they had this really awesome table, and it talked about the different melting points, the stable points, and the annealing points of like quartz to like soft glass. So you can see like, oh, 900 is the I forget what it's called. It's the I think it's like the stress point. It's basically once you get below 900, then it's in a stable state.
Right.
And then
For
obviously
borosilicate.
1050 is the annealing stage. Ending that like, well, as you know, you melt a glass. Hot glass and cold glass looks identical.
I've burnt myself a few times.
Couple of times, yeah, but it's like that understanding of that glass can look identical, different stages of matter.
Right. Yeah, that it's just crazy how, and that's the neat thing about glass, you know,
Oh
is
yeah,
it's it's a form of art that has clear. I don't know any art that you get to play with clear. Maybe ice
yeah.
sculptures, but that's white almost looking when it's done. You can't. It's not clear. It's
Well, going back to that previous question, like if I was to say my true answer, my favorite color would probably be clear.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it from like a teaching standpoint of understanding wall thickness and just like
Mhm.
a general purity standpoint as far as like the material is concerned. Like don't be wrong, I love color, but like if you look at 90% of my work, I mainly work with clear.
Well, you know, and I really like the blade in clear. I think it looks awesome. You know, when you have that stuff, if it was color, while it will look neat and all that, it doesn't give the same feel as like a real knife. Like the glass, the clear glass really does represent the shiny metal. And
Thank
so
you, I appreciate that.
it just has to work like that, I think. And
Well, I've learned a couple of tricks. Is one thing I love about clear is the way that it bends light. So, well, what I'll do is on one of my machetes is I'll put the post as a UV color. So when you hit it with the light, it acts like a fiber optic cable, and then all of a sudden the blade is like a nice slight glow of the UV color.
yeah, and that, like that you mentioned it, that's what's really cool about clears. Like uh I've seen opals where you pull them up into like a pokey thing up here and you get two
Yeah.
opals in there. There's only one, but the optics pulled it up there and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
clear. You know, like it doesn't exist, but it's there.
Oh,
Um,
totally. Like I've gotten like on my Instagram, I've been following a lot of people who do faceting, and just like they do like that facet cut where like when you look down it looks like seven opals,
mhm.
but it's only one opal. It's just the optics of it.
Right. Yeah. That have you done any of that before?
I've n- I do some cold working, but I don't have like a fastening jig set up. Like all my cold working on the machetes I do freehand.
Much like a blade maker would, kind of grinding it down and doing it machine handed. And
Oh yeah, no, actually, while I was developing the technique, I actually looked into a lot of different knife manufacturing techniques just to like base it off of like because like when you're building a knife, it's very similar to making a machete blade out of glass. Like you have to get certain angles set up, and there's certain techniques that you can use to ensure that the bevel stays perfectly aligned.
right, that's cool, man. Right. And so each new task is another adventure that
Oh
you
yeah,
get to go down in glass. Um, do you find that you still have the same love and passion today as when you first started?
I would say so. This is going to sound horrible, but I don't have as much enthusiasm as when I first began. But that's a good thing because I am bipolar. So in the beginning, it was a very unhealthy manic obsession.
And
And
you
I've
were
been able to,
just
oh yeah, I was working like 16, 18 hours at a time because I thought I was going to improve my skill. But the reality was I was just making myself tired. So
mhm.
now I feel as though my enthusiasm is at the perfect point where like I'm loving what I do, but I'm also prioritizing enjoying life as a whole.
And that's balance. That's the perfect, that's finding the balance in it. So it's not that you don't appreciate it any less or anything. It's
Oh
you
yeah.
found a more equilibrium balanced where you can enjoy you and enjoy
Oh
the
totally.
glass even more probably.
Oh yeah, I definitely enjoy it quite a lot. Um,
I'm on here. Hey, Drew. Oh, there it went. Sorry.
Okay, we're back. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
did
like I
disappear.
sweet. Yeah, I definitely enjoy the material, but I'm at a much more stable state of mind. Helps making more friends, so I'm not always talking about color. Like I was joking with this other glass blowers, not glass blowers at Las Vegas, because like they won't bitch at me for complaining about the differences between pomegranate and red Elvis. There's a difference. As you know, there's a definite difference, but my friends are
A
like,
huge difference.
they don't care.
No, it's a huge difference. Pomegranate, you have to use a lot more if you want to get that nice ruby compared to Elvis. And Elvis is just Elvis is sexy. I love that
Oh,
color.
it's sexy.
It is just
That was a staple in my bond making days because it auto fired. It would always at least head. So when you're doing a batch cycle, like you make a bunch of pieces and you just batch fire them, you always guarantee that they come out red. The
right.
downside, as you know, is it livers out. Pomegranate doesn't do that.
And that's true too, right? There's like everything in life. Pros and cons, baby. What do you want to do?
I think the best lesson my Dan from Spaceglass taught me was, as a glass blower, you have to understand that when you melt glass, it wants to go into its natural state of being, and that natural state of being is directly into the trash can. And your job as a glass blower is a buffer to stop that from happening.
That's kind of funny, like he said that spaceman coming from there and just the galaxy. The galaxy is always going into chaos and man's trying to stop that. So right, it just wants to go in the bucket.
Oh, 100%.
You got to control that thing.
It also teaches like beginning glass blowers, like that lesson is more quality. Like sometimes if you do a seal, if you go back in to fuck with a seal, you might fuck that seal up. You got to be aware of that. It's not adding in more work is always better, you know?
Right. So is there times like if something might crack or something or whatever, you might just say, fuck it, I got to just leave it as that. It's going to be a second. It's going to be this rather than try to go in there, fix it, and then it's even worse.
If any of my blades crack, I just stop the build immediately because I've tried healing the cracks and it's noticeable. I've shown it to like a bunch of people and they can't notice it, but if I notice it, it's a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
And
right.
as you know, with like healing cracks, those blades are 10 mil thick.
Yeah, they're thick.
They're not going back together very easily. So the likelihood of you getting a crack out and it getting whooped is 110%.
Right. Man, that's hard. And that's why you had so many other blades the other day, because they weren't perfect for you, exactly what you wanted. And while they're good, you have those high quality demands that you demand of yourself.
Well, in the beginning, I'd hone at least like I'd sit down for a couple of days, I'd hone out like 15, 16 pieces. And if I'm being honest, I'd get maybe 4 that were good, and then I'd have to toss the rest. But that was in the very beginning when I first was understanding how to do a bevel. And then on top of that, like I'm blowing glass with acute angles, like a shit ton of acute angles. Every single one of my blades is just a long acute angle.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different like little tricks I have to pull just to even pull it off.
Man, nuts. I think that's it for me, man. This was really awesome. Did you have anything you wanted to add? What's the best place we can follow you and see more of your work and support you?
So the best place to follow me on is on my Instagram, which is GlassMD. I'm currently setting up a big cartel page. I'm actually, if you saw my new machete stands, I'm actually going to be selling those on my big cartel.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to get more stuff out there. 100% of my work I sell to head shops like yourself. I if someone contacts me for a piece, I like to redirect them to the shop that's carrying it. But if you want to just ask me questions about my work, I don't have much of a life, so hit me up. I'm down to talk about machetes and knives or axes or hammers or orcs or elves and the whole sort.
And with that, that's really awesome that you do that, because you see, you know how business works and all that, and it takes everything. And that's really cool that you support your shops that support you and all that. And but you're there for your customers as well. And when you have these shops that have the stuff, to get it from you, even if they want it, it might be a month to 6 months out, but they can go get it from a shop, and you have those shops where you can direct them.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll 100% tell. This might sound shitty, but usually it's more expensive to go through me than a shop. because you already have overhead set up to do that kind of business. I don't. So I'm having to take time out of my day to fill in work that you guys are already doing. Like
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a custom request and I just contact the local shop in the area and be like, hey, I got a guy who wants to buy a custom off me. Do you want to middleman this transaction? It's easier on me and you guys.
That's really awesome, man. Yeah. Well, this was super freaking awesome. It's always been great talking to you at the events. I hope we get to work together someday here shortly as well.
Most stuff. Yeah, you better let me know when you have another one of those projects lined up.
We're gonna do it. I'm gonna wait till so it's 1 year every year. I'm gonna do it, and it would be an
Awesome.
honor for you to join us because, man, it was a lot of fun, man, and a lot of work, and I think we got a lot of bugs worked out because holy fuck, I fucked shit up. So.
Awesome. It's always the first time that's like that's the biggest learning curve. The
You know,
small, stupid stuff.
and then at Glass Vegas, I've never dropped my booth before, but I got all this shit up, man, and all the glass, and my fucking booth went over. So, yeah, like I didn't break anybody else's glass around me. I just broke some of the artists' glass that were part of the experience. So, but I can take care of that. But yeah.
Because at least you have a good relationship with the people you work with. So it's always sucks when it's like someone you don't know.
Yeah, next thing you know, I'm getting punched down and I'm getting whatever and something. So
Because they don't know you. They don't know you're a cool guy who's gonna make it right,
well, it depends who you talk to, right? So well, Mad Machete Matt, dude, it was such a great time today. I had a blast here. I appreciate it. And
Well, thank you for having me, man.
yeah, I can't wait to see what else you come out with because you got cool stuff coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.